All right, installing this front wheel. We got, this is the brake here. It's always going on the left side. We got this little prong here down at the end. That's gonna go into a little piece of metal that's sitting right here. We got the 2 bolts with the 2 washers. The washers, remember, if we got some rough edges, we got a flat side, a real smooth side, and the other side has some lines on it. And we're gonna get this started, just 1 or 2 turns, get that started. Same thing over here. So you want to be looking at that. And then of course you got the bolt here. That's actually pretty tight. If you can get that hand tight, maybe with a tool, it's supposed to be about 15 Newton meters. That's always going to be sitting there. We'll make sure this is moving nice and easy. If this is too tight, then maybe that bolt is too tight. So washer, 1 or 2 turns for your bolt. That way you got some good space to work with. And slide your washers back. Go ahead and align this brake right here. We want that brake, that tip of that brake, we'll call it the prong, to go inside the piece of metal here. It's gonna slide right in there. And if you're in the stand, I like to use my body to kind of hold the wheel. So now I got my left hand free. I can make sure the washer's out of the way and the bolt's loose. Slide that up and in. I'm just gonna do these finger tight, the bolts, left side, right side. That's gonna hold. And we wanna make sure that that wheel's sitting nice and straight, because the wheel could be sitting a little bit to the left or to the right, which will get you some brake rub. So remember, the bike goes down to the ground. It'll stand nice and flat. Open these up a little bit, let the wheel settle, get nice and straight, then we can retighten these bolts while it's on the floor. So before I take it down to the ground, I'm gonna go ahead and hook up our brake here. This is our front brake line. So we got that piece of metal. It's gonna lodge itself in there. There's the big hole, and then it's gonna slide down. Boom. And then this guy right here just sits right inside there. So that plastic barrel adjuster has got to come down, make contact with the piece of metal. It's gonna fit perfectly. And then this piece over here is going to, remember, this piece of metal is going to hook, it actually says cable hook, so it's going to hook right behind this piece of metal, and then it's going to come around and get lodged here. We also want to make sure that our cable, everything is seated properly. So remember up here, this guy, sometimes if it's loose, he can pop out and not seat properly. He can get stuck on the edge. So we want to make sure that this is our housing, goes back into our barrel adjuster. And then if you find that it's continuing to fall out, remember, we can twist this barrel adjuster, and then we have the lock ring. So we got a slot here, we have a slot on the lock ring, and then a slot on the barrel adjuster, so we can turn these two, actually maybe probably 3 independently. So make sure that's seated nicely, because if it's not seated nicely, you're gonna have trouble getting this whole cable housing in. Remember this, we can put 2 tools on this one here, 10 millimeter and a 10 millimeter. If we needed to, we can unloosen and slide this up the cable or slide down, depending on what adjustment we're doing. But what I think we're going to do is, this guy has to slide right in here, this piece of plastic. So, and I believe the nut where you can put your wrench is going to be sitting out. There's a little red dot here. That's going to be facing you. So I'm going to get that. Let's see here. So right now the cable's a little bit tight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dislodge the top here, and then I'm going to do the bottom one first. And there'll be a slot, there we go. So that just slides right in. Then I can come up, I can hook the cable right behind this piece of metal. There's that piece of metal right there. Just gonna tuck that in there, and then over here, if I need to, if this is a little too tight, I can pull up and it starts activating the brake. And if you need to, you can come push it with your finger, hold it, and then you can go ahead and get that seated, release. Now this guy's seated as well. And then you can go ahead and test your brake lever, and we got brake action. So that's good. So now we can bring the bike down to the ground. So bike standing nice and straight. We don't want it leaned over to the side. You don't want to touch the wheel, because we're going to make sure the wheel's straight. Right now the wheel's crooked. It's leaning over to the left, hitting the right side of the fork. So I'm going to loosen these up with my finger a little bit. And then I'm going to tap the wheel with the palm or the hammer, like the hammer fist. couple taps like that. So if the wheel's stuck on one side, it'll straighten itself up, sitting nice in the line. We're going to tighten the left side a little bit, tighten the right side a little bit. Or that's a 15 millimeter tool. And we're just going to tighten, remember, a little bit at a time. And if you use the kickstand like I just did, the wheel just went crooked because we just took a lot of weight off that front wheel. So I got to loosen this back up. Put the kickstand up. Do not use the kickstand. Give it a tap again. Make sure it's sitting fairly center. And then we're going to tighten a little bit on the left, a little bit on the right until we get to a full torque. That was just a lot loose. And if you choose to, you get a torque wrench. Torque setting for these, I'd have to look at the book, but it might be like 25, maybe 35 Newton meters. But you want these fairly tight. You don't want this wheel coming loose on you. You don't want the bolts vibrating loose down the road. And then once you do that, you want to lift the bike up by the stem, get the front wheel off the ground, about an inch or two, give the wheel a spin. We're just testing it, making sure that the brakes are not dragging. Then you can go ahead and hit your brake lever, testing the brake. That should feel good. It should stop the wheel quickly. The brake lever should not touch the handlebar. If it's touching the handlebar when you brake, of course it's dependent on how hard you're squeezing. If you do it very gently, that's first contact, and I still have about half the distance to squeeze even further if I need to. So I'm pretty happy with that. If you squeeze gently and the lever touches the handlebar, then we have to readjust our cable, which is going back down to that pinch bolt and readjusting that lock nut bolt.